Today's guest is Justin Roethlingshoefer. Growing up, Justin was an athletic but overweight kid who had an immense joy and love for sports. As he entered his teenage years and started training heavier and heavier for hockey, he began losing weight and received a lot of applause and recognition from his peers and coaches and other people instead of the usual criticism and bullying he had been experiencing. These positive affirmations about his appearance led Justin to a near fatal battle with anorexia, depriving his body of proper nutrition for years in an effort to avoid gaining back the weight. Today, he coaches everyone from NHL stars to Fortune 500 executives to entrepreneurs looking for holistic health solutions to improve their lives. Justin shares many valuable and meaningful lessons that he's learned on his journey, all the way from anorexia to now helping others achieve complete and total wellness. We talk about everything from realizing your self-worth, when to trust others, overcoming insecurity and doubt, and the power behind taking ownership and freedom that comes from speaking up for what you believe in. I can't wait for you to hear his story. Let's jump in. Hey, Justin, welcome to the show.
How are you, Adrienne?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you here because you and I have known each other maybe about a year, a little bit over a year now. And I've just had such an incredible, it's been a gift to get to know you. So I'm excited to get to know you more today and share your story.
Well, the feeling's very mutual where you just have such a pure heart and your intentions are so amazing, and just being in your presence, your energy all the time just fills my cup up. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, you have quite a story. There's a lot, like most people listening have been through many challenges in life, and really those are what's necessary to shape us into who we are today. And your story kind of starts back in your teen years. I know around 13 years old. So let's go back to that. I want to start there before we move through some of the other things that you've faced in your life.
Yeah, so I was always the chubby kid. I was the heavy set kid. I was the fat kid. And it was unique, right? Because even though I was the fat kid, the chubby kid, you don't often think of the fat and chubby kid as the athletic kid. But that's the combination that I had. And a lot of times what I found was the only times I wasn't getting made fun of, the only times I wasn't being picked on, the only times that I was actually chosen first was in athletics. And so I developed this performance heart, if you will, very early in life, where I saw a lot of my value, a lot of my worth in that space. And I'm a late bloomer. I didn't hit puberty till I was like 16. And so as you can imagine, this baby-faced, chubby, fat kid is going through these late development stages. And I still remember at 11 years old, my parents took me, they knew the struggles I was going through. They took me to a study at the University of Alberta. And it was for kids who were overweight and really looking at habits and things that they were going through, things that we were engaging in, and did a whole bunch of testing. So VO2 max testing, body composition, and there was a test to really look at, hey, what is the trend of our city's population and the trends that we're actually seeing in outcomes and quite frankly, in just overweight children. Right. And if you went and you looked at the results of that, I was in the top 1% of everything in terms of activity, in terms of testing, in terms of numbers, in terms of time of watching television, like literally minimal, like nothing. Right. Like I didn't fit in with that crowd. I was very different. And when I went to do my VO2 max testing, you have to remember I was born in Canada. Hockey was my thing, born in Edmonton, Edmonton Oilers. And I went in to do my testing, and on the bike, this is just a huge God moment, on the bike before me was Ty Conklin, who was the starting goaltender for the Edmonton Oilers. Wow. And I was watching him, and that's who I saw myself as. That's who I saw literally as the hockey player, that's who I saw myself becoming. Yeah. And so I'm watching him, and he gets off the bike. And as I get on the bike, I get all done up. I sit down, he throws me a towel and he says, "Hey, go crush it, kid." And I was just like, I just felt that like so deeply. And so I get my test done. I ultimately end up leaving. And they, about 2 weeks later, they had an article come out in the newspaper in the lifestyle section about this study. And lo and behold, who's on the front page, the front cover, but me. Wow. And the title is, remember, this is a very positive experience for me at this point. Like, my parents did this to try boost my confidence, boost my self-esteem, because they knew how I was living, what I was doing, but I didn't look the part, and they wanted to try and boost the confidence there. I end up having this experience. I'm now on the front page of the newspaper, and the title or the headline is "Fat and Fit?" ?
Oh, wow.
And I show up at school the next day, and every kid has cut this thing out, and there's probably, Adrienne, no word of a lie, probably 150 of these pasted around campus or around the classrooms and the hallways. And everyone's laughing, everyone's joking, everyone's poking fun. And so this thing that was so positive for me turns into this thing that literally just crushes me. And the fear of becoming fat and all of these things start to continue just be in me. Fast forward to 12 and 13 and 14 years old, and I start training. Like I've never trained before, because that time came in a young hockey player's life to start getting these things acclimated. And just because I start training in a different way that I haven't been before, I start to lose some weight. I start to lose some weight some more. I start to now have like two abs starting to pop out. You can start to see some of the shoulder definition at 13 and 14 years old. And I still remember finishing the season at 13 and going into tryouts as a 14-year-old, going to tryouts with 16, 17-year-olds, playing really like up in my age categories. And I showed up at tryouts, and parents looked at me going, "Justin?" Like double taking. Like they didn't recognize me. And for the first time, I was getting positively affirmed for the way that I looked. And I was like, wow, this is actually kind of cool. Teammates were like, "Hey, you look awesome. You look great. This is so great." Coaches, same thing. And I didn't do anything different. Like in terms of how I was, my habits, in terms of what I was doing, I didn't change anything other than maybe training a little bit harder. But at that time, I didn't even think about it. And so me initially go, "Oh my gosh, what just happened to my body? I don't have any control. I don't understand this. I need to now control everything, because I'm not going back to the way that it was before. I'm not going back to getting made fun of." And so that's what started my downward trend, where I started to, and Adrienne, it got to a point where I was having cold showers every single morning. I was sleeping naked in a cold room because I knew it burned more calories. I was eating only vegetables and small amounts of meat at meal times. I was running between classes. I would have to do 10 squats every time I got to my locker. I'd have to do 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups every time I walked through a door frame. If I saw a set of stairs, I had to run up and down before I could pass them. Like, it became this obsessive compulsive OCD control mentality that just overtook my life. And from 14 at 140 pounds, came 16 at 97.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I remember walking up the stairs at 16 years old. And again, over the course of these 2 years, I knew mentally that I wasn't well. Like, I was exhausted all the time. I had no energy. I felt like I was having out-of-body experiences all the time. I wasn't sleeping well. But yet at the same time, I was still a 4.0 GPA. I was still playing AAA hockey. I was still what everyone else would say is excelling. But internally, I knew I was an absolute like dumpster fire. And there was this morning that I walked up the stairs and my body ached. I had pains in my low back, and I opened the door and I walked into the kitchen to see my mom, and literally her jaw hit the floor. And I didn't really understand what was going on. And when I looked in the mirror, my face was yellow, like literally yellow. She took me to the hospital. We went to the doctors. My kidneys were shutting down. My liver was shutting down. And your boy was in trouble. And that was really kind of like that moment that I knew that I had stepped into something that was far beyond where I actually needed it to go. But the downside was I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know what to do because that fear still existed. And my parents battled with me for about 2.5 years. Therapists, in and out of hospitals, threats to take away hockey, threats to take away athletics, threats to take away all these things that I was really excelling at and that really only gave me the only joy in life that I had. And it wasn't until I walked into the arena. I transferred schools, went to a hockey academy, and the coach that was coaching me at 12 years old was now the coach of this hockey academy. And I walked in 12 to 17. He hasn't seen me in 5 years. Walk in that door and he looks at me. He looks at me once. He looks at me twice. And he goes, Justin. I was like, Carl, how are you? And he goes, are you okay? And I said, what do you mean? He said, are you okay? And I burst into tears.
Oh,
like
wow.
it makes me emotional now even thinking about it, but I burst into tears because no, I wasn't okay.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't okay. And I didn't know how to become okay.
Yeah.
And so that was like that moment. And he became the coach that really brought me along and got me to ultimately realize that he was really the first person I could trust, to be honest with you. Because I had gone to all the nutritionists, I'd gone to the iridologist, I had gone to the therapist, I'd gone to the eating disorder clinics, I'd gone to all these places, but I didn't feel like I belonged there. I didn't feel like I fit in. And at the end of the day, I ultimately couldn't trust anything that anybody was saying because it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And they were giving me generalized solutions, generalized processes that are supposed to be for everybody. But you don't know me. You don't know my life. I'm still playing hockey. I'm not that 17-year-old girl that's 55 pounds that looks like she would break if somebody blew on her.
Right.
And like I'm playing hockey with 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. Like I'm playing AAA hockey. I will go play a hockey game tonight and nobody in this room can.
Yeah.
And so this was that mentality. And to be honest with you, Adrienne, my thought process was that I'm putting myself through hard things and I'm building strength. I'm building a mindset of resiliency, where in the actual other side of it, I was actually just killing myself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, what I've seen happen commonly with young boys, young men, that when they're overweight, and whether they hit puberty or not, if they're sick of being made fun of about it, they turn that fat into muscle, right? And they become big bodybuilders and they go to the other extreme. And it's interesting that you became so obsessed with it. You were still doing the things to keep you strong, but you weren't eating enough. And so therefore becoming anorexic, and the opposite was happening for you, is rather than you becoming like, you know, super muscular and super big and obsessed with that, you went the opposite way. And I could see where you could feel like, I can't trust other people because they can't relate to me, right? I don't fit the mold of someone who has anorexia. I don't fit the mold of someone who, even when you were overweight, like you said. And so it probably feels like these people don't understand me. They don't know my situation. And so therefore I can't really take their advice or trust them. And so you're still just leaning on yourself of like trying to make the best choices to stay an athlete, not become overweight again, still get that attention that felt really good. And so that's really interesting. Why do you think, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but why do you think you went the direction of anorexia versus the direction of like, oh, I'm just going to become this like massive bodybuilder in order like to get out of the being overweight situation?
I mean, I think, to be honest with you, there's still the body image issues or the body image components that I still deal with today. That I don't think you ever outgrow those, but I'm aware of them and I've healed from where I'm at. Now they're just scars, and there are things that come up or feelings that come up that I can come back to and be like, oh, that's not the truth. That's a lie. That's not a truth. That's a lie. And so in developing that over the course of time, I think that was there. I think there was this misunderstanding or this misnomer for me was about nutrition and about health, about what I actually needed to do. That because I didn't understand it, I'm just going to stay away from it. Because I can't understand it, I'm just going to step away completely. And I still remember there was a couple nutritionists that we went to, a couple clinics that we had admitted me at that were giving me things like Ensure, were giving me things like high calorie shakes and just garbage food with high calories that I was just like, this can't be good for me. Like, this is not, if you're telling me this is my solution, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And
so they're just like, put on weight. They don't care if it's good weight or they're just like, just put some weight on.
And there was this inability for me to understand what was happening. I knew what was happening wasn't good for me, but I didn't understand what I needed to do in order to get to where I wanted to go. Because I didn't want to look 97 pounds.
Right.
I didn't want to be that way, but I also didn't want to be 150 pounds and overweight and get made fun of.
Right.
If someone said to me, and I've used this line for a lot of kids that I've talked to that have gone through body image issues and eating disorder things, if I was to tell you, hey, you could look exactly how you wanted to at 180 pounds, would you be okay with that? And the answer is yes, of course. You are looking for a certain look. It has nothing to do with the number on the scale. We associate the number on the scale with a certain look, but we really have no idea. And so at the end of the day, if we can actually start to understand what our body needs in a very unique way, in a very personalized way, and then start to ultimately move towards a certain aesthetic that we're looking for, it doesn't matter what's happening behind the scenes in terms of a number. It matters in terms of what we do consistently in order to get there. And that was the big thing that I had to overcome and that I just had to trust. And it wasn't until I found Carl that he was able to actually, because I knew that he had done it. I knew that he did this for people. I knew that he did this for professional hockey players. And I was like, hey, that's what I want to look like. Maybe I just trust exactly what he says. And he started to educate me. He started to talk me through things. He started to empower me in a way that ultimately became my career, going and getting my master's degree, doing all my doctoral work in that same field, and then ultimately turning it into what my mission is now, in which I kind of empower people to do. And so that really kind of looking back on it was the journey of going from, hey, this is what you have to do, throwing it in my face, but knowing deep down that this wasn't aligned with what was true for me. But there was this dichotomy or this battle internally between, hey, this is what you're being told to do, that you yet know this isn't true, but it doesn't make sense. And then there's a deep fear of going back to the way I was and feeling out of control. And these two things would pull on me constantly that I was in a battle of, and I didn't know what to do in order to get out of it. And that's the stuck position that I was in.
Yeah. I've been in that same position myself, not to that extreme, but I've been on a health journey myself and I feel and look the best that I have in a long time. And my trainer is telling me, like, you need to eat more food. And like, in order to build more muscle, like you're not eating enough in order to build what you're trying to build. And I'm like, but I'm scared that if I eat more, I'm going to go back to how I felt before and how unhappy I was. And I'm almost 46 years old and I'm having that battle of like, but if I do that, and she just keeps educating me, right? And like helping me to understand why it's good and why it makes sense. And you get, for me, I had to get to a point where I have to trust that she knows what she's talking about. She knows more than I do, that it's, but it's hard even as an adult. I can't even imagine as a teenager, being in that position when you probably feel even a little bit more helpless as a young adult than you even do as an adult,
100%. And I think it comes back to ultimately knowing what your body needs and being so unique. We all have unique fingerprints. We all have unique needs. We all have unique lifestyles. We all have unique goals. We all have unique aspirations. But yet society tells us here's a broad brushstroke approach to get you everything that you could want. Well, that just can't be true. That's just not the way that it works. And so I think that's why a lot of people struggle, is because the world tells you here's the way that we do it instead. And there's so much conflicting information. Like, eat all of this, don't eat all of this. Eat only meat, don't eat meat. Eat only vegetables, don't eat vegetables. Go to sleep at this time, don't go to sleep at this time. Wake up at this time, don't do this. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, like complete opposites. And there's these, like, what is true, what is not? Well, the unique part is that everything is kind of true, but the majority of it isn't true for you because what you need is unique. What you need is different. And the moment that you can have somebody who's willing to educate you, empower you, and equip you with the information of what your body needs it is only at that point that you can step forward knowing, hey, this is built for me. I can trust this. Whether I'm 25, whether I'm 45, whether I'm 85, I'm going to need something different in my season of life. And because everything is constantly changing as my body changes, as my body adapts, of course it's going to work. Of course it's going to get me to where I want to go, because it's not the world's solution. It's my solution.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that is really kind of the journey that you started to go through as you reconnected with Carl, and he's educating you and help you move through this. So how did you kind of get to the other side of no longer being anorexic and putting on weight and being healthier? Like what did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, so Carl got me through 3 really tough years in my life, and ultimately I came down to the States on a hockey scholarship, and did a double undergraduate degree in exercise science and nutrition. And then as that continually started to educate me, the same thing kind of happened. I was like, yeah, but you're telling me a lot of things that I just know aren't true, because I've been in this for about 5 years now. I'm tracking data, I'm looking at numbers, I'm looking at information, and everything I'm learning is just very generalized. And then I went and got my master's degree, and the same type of thing kind of happened. I was like, okay, you got me bought in a little bit more, but there's still like some things I just don't understand. And I started to go and started to do a lot of research with some of my professors, and started to dive deep into the personalization side, the data side, the unique application side. I then started to do postgraduate work looking at sleep and heart rate variability. And at that point, my work started to get recognized by some people going, oh my gosh, like this guy's onto something. He's changing the way that we do health, wellness, and performance in this world. And stepped into the NHL and started to see again a lot of these generalized principles. We all train the same, we all eat the same, we all supplement the same, we all travel the same, we all train the same. Like everything was the same, but yet we wondered why we got the same results. Why are we getting injured at the same time? Why are we getting sick at the same time? Why are we seeing energy lulls at the same time? Well, it's because we're not actually individualizing it. We're not actually putting the personalized approach to things. And that was really kind of what brought me there. And so having that level of control and having that level of knowledge was really powerful. But to be honest, Adrienne, what got me over the edge, what allowed me to truly heal that wound that was sitting there, was realizing that I actually had a performance heart, and there was a heart set that I needed to change. There was a heart set that needed to heal. And knowing that my worth wasn't determined based upon the race I won, the game I won, my performance on the ice, my performance in the classroom, the degrees I had. That wasn't the title of my job. That's not what determined my worth. It was just the fact that, hey, I was chosen. I was put here for a purpose. I was ultimately created for something bigger. And when I realized that and was able to actually have that healing completed, everything that I had now gone through, everything that I had overcome, everything that I had experienced just took 100x up, I think, up-leveling approach to how I was able to show up and serve people, because now I was no longer burdened with that constant fear, that constant voice in my head that kept pulling me down and leaving that fear, doubt, and insecurity that was able to be truly kind of stepped away from.
Yeah. I think so many, I'm sure there's other areas where this affects people, but especially in young athletes, I feel like their identity quickly becomes like, oh, I'm an athlete, right? My worth is in how well I play on the football field, or, how great I perform in the soccer game or whatever. Yeah. And that can be really hard to break away from especially if you don't go on to play college sports and your whole identity in high school or even in college is wrapped around being an athlete. And then it comes to an end and you're left wondering, like, who am I? What is my value and my worth and my purpose here, when it's so wrapped up in that? And that can really be very challenging for a lot of people.
100%. And I think it comes back to the role of coaches in our lives, is being able to teach people that, hey, this is just a game. The game is not going to be with you forever. Your identity is not locked up in that, but rather it's just a part of something that you do. And I think I talk about this a lot in terms of like our sequencing of how we see life, right? Because the world tells us everything's physical. The solution is physical. The solution is meditation. The solution is journaling. The solution is working out. The solution is training. It's eating differently. But at the end of the day, that's what we see. That's the action. But the underlying part of this iceberg is actually mental, emotional, and spiritual. And if we can connect to something and be able to connect spiritually to God and be able to understand, okay, what is the desire of my heart for you? What is your identity, not in Justin, but in who God's made you to be?
Yeah.
That renews the mind, knowing, hey, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, which heals our heart from whatever heart set we have, the performance heart, the hardened heart, the addicted heart, the spoiled heart. What does that look like? So we can heal from that and then be able to dictate what that physical outcome looks like, what the physical action looks like that you need to step into, not because the world has told you that's what you have to do.
Yeah. I think that I've been guilty of that most of my life, where I believe that I can outdo whatever the problem is. You know, I've like prided myself in being this logical, unemotional person. And it really wasn't until the last couple years of my life that I realized that actually wasn't healthy at all. That wasn't really very admirable to be like, I'm unemotional. Like, you know, not that I, you know, want to be a hot.
I'm emotionally unavailable and you can't touch me.
Yeah. You know, and I had kind of a sense of pride around that, right? Like, oh, I'm so strong, I'm so tough, you can't hurt me, and I can handle anything, and all of these things. And the way that that's reinforced was in the doing, right? I'm a performer in business, right? I make things happen in business. And that eventually, you know, when I went through my divorce, brought me to a point where I realized, like, all of this doing that I think is what makes, you know, me valuable and worthy was completely wrong. And there was a lot of undoing and unlearning that had to happen there. But I think so many people do see their value in what they do instead of who they actually are. And a lot of times we become disassociated with who we actually are because it feels too hard to face it or deal with it. And so we just feel better by continuing to just do.
You see this in a lot of leaders, to be honest with you, where they feel like there's this one approach to things. There's only one way in which they can do things. And the inability to be vulnerable, the inability to be open, the inability to be emotionally available is just a protective mechanism for them not to let people in, to ultimately make sure that, hey, I can't get hurt this way.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those leaders, even though they think they're leading from a place of authority, they're leading from a place of intensity, they're leading from a place of follow me, let me pave the path for you. I'm not going to show you that I'm hurting. I'm not going to show you that I'm beat down. What they actually end up doing is they just end up bleeding all over everybody else. And it's only once you can heal from these things, be open, be vulnerable, talk about it, bring people into your experience. That's the leader that elevates everybody else, because they can actually start to relate. They can actually start to rally behind you. And you can still lead the way. You can still lead the charge. You can still be tough. You can still be strong. You can still be courageous. You can still be bold. But you're open, vulnerable, and authentic. And that's what ultimately allows us to impact people at a deeper level.
Yeah, I can say that, you know, the very first time I probably ever showed any vulnerability to my team was when I had to tell them that my husband was moving out and I was getting a divorce, because up until then, none of them probably even had any idea that there was a problem. And I didn't share those things, but it got to a point, and that was very scary to do, to go to my team and be like, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to need y'all to fill in. Like, I need to step back. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me to do, was to be able to go to my team and say, I'm not okay, and I need your help. But I can tell you now, looking back, having done that, and there were days when I would tell my team, like, hey, I can get one thing done today, and that's all I have capacity for, because I'm a mess. What's the number one priority today?
Yeah.
And that was so scary to do as a leader, because I didn't want to be seen as weak or less than or not capable. I didn't want to scare them into being like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But looking back now, I can say that one of the best things that I ever did was just being very open and honest with my team as I was going through that process. because it also allowed for them to open up as well. And I think that it brought us all closer, and it didn't make them look at me different or respect me any less. I think that they were honored to be able to step up and help and support. And it really just brought our team together a lot closer.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So you go into work in the NHL, and you're working with the players, helping them with their bodies, right? Feeding their bodies, taking care of their bodies. And I know that, we've talked about, some trends that you noticed. You had your own injury and started taking opioids for that. Let's move into that part of your story, because I think there's an important lesson here also.
Yeah. So at 25 years old, had some old nagging hockey injuries, especially in the hips and whatnot, and had a little bit of a hip dysplasia, and ultimately that needed to have some level of correction. And one of the biggest things and one of the easiest things to do was just be prescribed some type of painkiller for the pain in which you were going through. And so when you have a labrum tear, I don't know if everybody's ever had a labral tear, but it's constant aching, it's constant pain. It's just you do certain movements and you can't sleep at night. Like, these things just start to wear on you. And so for me, I was like, man, it feels really good. It's awesome, right? You're looking after the pain. And it became just something that very slowly became a pattern, became something that took over me and in my life. And I just started to see this addiction start to form, not out of anything other than what I call like a life by default, just going on with what it was that was in front of me. And when all of a sudden I picked my head up, it was opiates in the morning, opiates at noon, opiates in the afternoon, to get myself through. And it became just this numbing agent that I was operating on. And I knew I needed to make a change. I knew I needed to do something differently, and ultimately got myself off them. It didn't impact my life at all. Nobody really even knew, to be honest with you. I didn't tell anybody about this, not even my parents, until I was about 30. So it was about 5 years later.
Wow.
And there was one night I came home. I don't know if I've ever told this story on a podcast before, but I came home after a day and took my pills as normal, and ended up passing out on the floor. And when I woke up, I had both my dogs' heads on my shoulders, and they were looking at me just like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, what are you doing? And so it was that moment that just grabbed everything, flushed it all, just had like a aha, come to Jesus moment. And that was it. And over the next couple months, I started to notice things in the league and in a lot of stories that players were telling me. And I was down had started a camp for NHL guys in the summer to come to really kind of, again, optimize their bodies, get into testing, understand biometrics, get a very personalized approach to things. And a lot of guys coming down were talking about the painkillers they were on, the Toradol shots they were getting, the opiates they were using.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense to me. I was like, you guys have been doing this for how long? Like, you've been on this for 8 months, 9 months, 14 months, 24 months. Like, this doesn't make sense. And as I started to get more in tune to what was going on, it became just commonplace is, hey, I've got pain in my shoulder. Oh, great. Here's a script. Or, hey, I'm coming out of surgery, and great. Here's a month's supply. And now you've just got a continuation of, hey, the pain's still here. Hey, the pain's still here. Hey, I'm coming back to play a little early. I haven't fully healed.
Right.
So you're going to constantly have pain anyway. So there's another reason to just continue to get treated with this for the pain, rather than going to the source and being able to truly heal from something and work through. And so it started to just really sit poorly for me. And in one of my what ended up being one of my last years in the NHL, between 2016 and 2019, I had taken about 11 guys to rehab, all for opiates. And what was the last straw for me was really in 2019, 2020, where one of my best friends that I had kind of just seen come through the leagues, we played against each other. When I went into coaching, he continued to obviously have his playing career, which was amazing. And now getting to actually coach him on the other side, And he walked in one day and just, I knew something was off and realized he hadn't played a game sober in over a year and a half.
Wow.
And it was just this opiate addiction that had overtaken him. And about a day later, I flew him out to Dallas and went to a rehab facility. And we were about to play the Stars 2 days later, so I just stayed there, didn't fly back west. And I just remember laying in my hotel room crying, going like, "What are you doing? Like, you're literally in this cycle of, you're wanting to create change, you're wanting to help people, but you're in an institution that doesn't support it."
Yeah.
And so I started to take a stand, started to have conversations with players, started to give them alternatives that they could go through, where instead of getting the surgeries, instead of taking the painkillers, instead of getting the Toradol shots. And lo and behold, what do you start to get? You start to get pushed back. You start to get pushed back from the medical team. You start to get pushed back from the training staff, going, "You're not on the same page. You're not a team player. Why are you creating some type of dysfunction within our team setting?" And for a while, I slap on the wrist. Okay, let me back off. This is my career. Because at the same time, you have to remember, like, my ego was really bolstered by having this NHL logo on my chest and the NHL patch on my sleeve, and being able to say, "Hey, yeah, this is what I'm a part of. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing."
Right.
And it was about 8 months later that I started to speak up again, started to talk, started to do things that after 5 and 6 conversations just had fallen numb on me. I was just like, I just can't watch this anymore. And December of 2020, came into the locker room before a game, and the GM, the owner, the development staff was all there. They said, "Hey, let's go have a conversation." And I still remember sitting in that room, circular table. And they said, "Hey, I hear you're still doing this. You're still having conversation with the guys. You're not on the same team as the medical staff." And they said, "Are you on our team? Or are you on their team?" Talking about the staff or the players. And I said, "I thought we were on the same team."
Right.
I thought we were on the same team. And at that point, I just knew that it was career suicide. And that was it. That was the end of my NHL career. I knew that stepping in and taking a stand for something is what I ultimately needed to do. And it was no longer in alignment. And I knew that there was a greater purpose, a greater mission for this. But yeah, for the next 8 months after that, it was trying to figure out what was next. And it was a hard 8 months. But I think that experience of being able to take a stand for something, realize that there was something that was so wrong about what was considered normal, that we had to actually take a stand and create a change.
I think that it's really hard sometimes. Honestly, a lot of times I feel like, people think it's really easy to make bad choices, but sometimes making the right choice is actually harder.
Yeah.
There's a lot more at stake sometimes. Like, again, I'm just, thinking about this out loud. Like, I often think of bad choices are what bring bad consequences, or, things that we don't want into our life. But here you were making a choice for what was right, for standing up for what was in the best interests of others. And there was a really hard negative consequence to doing that. And there you didn't have this, great, like, reception of what you had to say and being able to go in there and make this huge difference, but you were willing to stand up. Like, what I mean by making a difference is they weren't like, "You're right, Justin, we should just change everything." You stood up for it no matter what there was to lose. And that takes a lot of courage to say, "I'm going to do what's right, even though it actually could hurt me."
I often say that if you think you're stepping in to go and make a sacrifice for something and there's no consequence, was it actually a sacrifice to begin with?
Yeah.
And so many of us want to be the person that's willing to stand up and, quote unquote, be the hero. But you have to realize that oftentimes when you step out and you do something different, when you step up and you take a stand for something, darkness, evil, whatever you want to call it, the enemy, there's always an opposing force. There's always something that's going to push against that. And whatever light you're trying to shine on it, although light wins at the end of the day, it doesn't mean it doesn't come without consequence. It doesn't come without sacrifice. It doesn't come without some hardship. And I think we often sometimes don't give that the credit it deserves. If we believe in God, you have to believe in the devil. And there's the dichotomy that always exists between the two. And so even in doing that, losing my job, not being able to be in the NHL, there was opportunities to go back into it. And it was something that wanted to stay as far away from. I just knew that wasn't my thing. But ultimately, what came of that was there was a documentary made. There was a ESPN 30 for 30 done on it. That ultimately ended up leading to 2.5 years later, league-wide mandates that changed on the utilization of opiates and Toradol and higher regulations in these areas. Is it perfect yet? No. Has it been eradicated and fixed? No. Yeah. Is it better than where it is or where it was? 100%. Does it continue to kind of move in that direction? 100%. Yeah. And it takes an army of people standing up to do the right thing. No matter what the consequences are, that's ultimately what determines character, because it's not what you do when it's convenient for you. It's not what you do when the pain doesn't precede, but also overarch the reward of what's going to come forward. Yeah. It's being willing to say, hey, this is the line in the sand. I'm not stepping over this line. This is something I'm standing up for and something I'm standing out for. And oftentimes when you stand up and stand out, there's going to be a consequence. There's going to be a sacrifice. And if you're willing to step up and you're willing to do that, it's something that allows you to put your head on your pillow at night and say, hey, I know that I did the right thing. I know that I'm going in the right direction. And even though I don't see it now, there's going to be something positive come out of this. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, even though you don't see it now, there's something positive come out of it. And that's, you have to believe that it's worth it, right? That what you're doing is going to make a difference eventually or have change, and that it's all worth it. And so looking back now, after, when we didn't even get to touch on lots of other things in your story, but looking back now on life and the choices you made and the things you've been through, what could you say are some of the positive blessings that came from really hard things?
Number one, just having a firm foundation in who I am, like knowing what my worth is, knowing who I was created to be, knowing where my identity lies, not in who I am, but whose I am. And that as I continue to step into that, as I continue to lean into that, and be obedient to what is being called, you can't make a wrong decision. Like hearing the voice of God and being able to just know exactly what he's calling you to do, like you can't lose. Like what a sense of freedom. And I think that's what continues to allow me to stand up and to stand out in different ways and be different and be unique and take ownership of that, and know that no matter where I go, no matter what decision I make, no matter where I take a stand in, as long as that is in alignment with who I've been made to be, what I've been called to do, I can't lose, even though the consequences may be harsh, even though the pain might be great, even though the outcomes may be not what I want in the moment. I know that whatever is coming down the road is going to be greater than what I can think about.
Yeah. I know that you left the NHL and you started your own business. You have a book coming out soon that I pre-ordered that I am super excited about. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, it's called The Power of Ownership. And subtitle, Redeem Your Health, Live Life by Design, and Break the Relentless Pursuit of Normal. And it really puts this dichotomy up of what is considered normal in our society versus what does a life of different look like. And the things that we've accepted as normal, the things that we've, the lifestyles, the habits, the choices, the medical system, all of these things that we've considered normal when it comes to our health, the symptoms we experience, the habits that we engage in, that are ultimately, what does it look like to do something differently? And how do we get to that point? What do we ultimately have a better understanding on? And so the goal of the book is to educate you, to equip you, and empower you to take ownership of your health and to move forward in a much more powerful way. Because the other thing I touch on in the book I think is pretty cool is a lot of people say that the medical system is broken. And I actually have a very contrarian approach to this. And I say the medical system isn't broken at all. It was designed to do two things: fix things that are broken and make a lot of money. And I think it does both of those things really, really well.
Yeah.
If I have a broken arm, I want you to fix it. I'm going to go to the medical system. If I need a liver transplant, I need you to fix it. Like, don't give me a supplement. Don't do some type of fancy test. Like, fix it.
Yeah.
But we want it to be preventable. We want it to look after our health. We want it to optimize our health. But that's not the medical system's job. It's our job.
Yeah.
But because we've become so confused, because we've been onslaught with so many things that we consider normal, we have to break that mold and do something different so that we can take ownership, we can be empowered, we can elevate ourselves to step into this new sense of different and ultimately realize health on a different level.
Yeah, I think that somewhere along the way, and you probably have your own thoughts about this, and I've never probably spent a ton of time thinking deeply about it, but just an observation that I've had in society is that we're really bad at taking ownership. Like, we want somebody else to fix it, somebody else to do the work, somebody else to be responsible.
Pass off the responsibility.
Yeah. Because then we're not the ones to blame, right? It's somebody else's problem, not ours. And I know that ownership, it's part of the name of your company, is a big part of your message and what you teach people. And where I think people think that freedom is in not having responsibility and ownership, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, 100%.
That freedom comes from us taking responsibility and having ownership in all areas of our life. And does that mean that you have to do some things that are uncomfortable and that are hard and that require discipline? Heck yeah. But the payoff is so worth it. And you're not at the mercy of someone else. Like you said, people want the healthcare system to keep them healthy. And you're like, that's not its job. That's your job. But then that means that we have to take ownership in that and do something about it. And I know that's what you've completely dedicated your life and your business to now. And so I'd love just any final thoughts on ownership and, people that are maybe listening to this and thinking like, yeah, you're right. But what do I do with that? I've been sitting back, letting somebody else dictate everything. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, I say ownership, or I define ownership as the intersection point between responsibility and accountability. And when the two intersect, it's an extremely powerful place to be, because for the first time, you're going to be able to say, hey, I have a system set up that I understand, that I can take action on. And I'm also in a place where I can realize that I don't need to be perfect, but rather I just need to continue to keep learning and iterating through this so that I can find what my version of that looks like. And when we realize that we don't rise to the level of our goals, but rather we fall to the level of our systems, and if we take a hard look in the mirror, our systems have been built for failure because there's been a lack of ownership and pushing it off on everybody else.
Yeah.
It really kind of opens up our eyes to where we can ultimately create some change and where we can go. And just the level of freedom. I love what you said. There's a level of freedom that comes with that. A simple analogy is, not to your health, but there was a door that was broken in, a hinge that had come unhinged in our home. And for the longest time, what I would have done is just said, hey, Elise, let's get this fixed. Call somebody in, and not having any accountability, not having any ownership of being able to do it myself. Well, all of a sudden I got fed up with it. And I was like, hey, let me actually look up how to actually change it, how to fix it, how to do this. 20 minutes later, It's fixed. It's done. It's looked after. And I didn't need to rely on anybody else. So true freedom for me, and what our goal is with everybody we touch, every client we have, every group we speak to, is to make sure that you are not dependent on a person, a place, or a thing, but rather you can have the understanding and take you from a sense of knowing to truly a sense of understanding. Because when you're knowing things, you still have to be convinced. But once you understand it, you are truly convicted, and you have the power to be able to step in and realize something different.
Yeah. This was fantastic. So, Justin, for people who want to order your book, they want to talk to you about working with you, get your help and support with their health and their fitness, how can they find you, and how would you like them to reach out?
Yeah. So the book, thepowerofownershipbook.com, you can find everything there. And then if there's anything health, performance, or wellness related, you can go to ownitcoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Justin, and for sharing your wisdom with everyone here today.
It was awesome, Adrienne. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. This story was a remarkable testament to human resilience, courage, and perseverance. To help you manage the ups and downs of your own life journey, I have a special gift for you called the Resilience Playbook. This free guide includes 12 resilience factors that gave me hope, inspiration, and empowerment during some of my darkest times. Whether you're navigating the ups and downs of a relationship, maybe you're facing unexpected twists in your career or your business, or you're tackling personal health challenges, whatever that challenge is in your life today, this playbook will equip you with the tools you need to strengthen your resilience muscle. To get your copy, find me on Instagram and send me a DM with the words playbook, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. Before we part ways today, I want to remind you that you can do hard things and that strength lies within you just waiting to be unveiled. I hope you'll carry the lessons shared today with you as you grow, evolve, and strengthen your resolve. If you enjoyed this episode, be a good friend and share it with someone you know could use it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, take care, my friend.